Hey everybody, back again to look at some more metal stuff. As I've been doing lately, 3 new buys, 1 old album, and an oddball item. So we're going to start off with this Autumn Aurora by Druk. Druk are a Ukrainian black metal band that I always tend to think of as going way back to the 90s, but in actuality, they formed in 2002. And this is their second full-length album from 2004. My first exposure to these guys was their fourth album, 2006's Blood in Our Wells. This CD is fairly new to me, but I remember I downloaded that around the time that it came out. And again, that was my first exposure to the band. And most people will tell you that these are their two best albums, the second and the fourth. Personally, I still got to go with Autumn Aurora as my favorite. Something about Eastern European black metal bands, just very melancholy, emotional, nostalgic, and dare I say whimsical feel to it. Folk influenced black metal with the feel of classic metal still intact and contrasting with some really nasty black metal vocals. My favorite songs on here have got to be Glare of Autumn and Wind of the Night Forest. But who can forget The First Snow, the instrumental outro track? It's just very powerful to me. And I remember many years ago just going on a hike in the woods, just tripping and listening to this. And rainy night, and it just completely seared this album in my brain. And years later, it was definitely time to get myself a hard copy. Classic album. Next up, this is Blood-Soaked Necrovoid, and the album's called Expelled into the Unknown Depths of the Unfathomable. So this was a blind buy. I was looking at a used CD store by my parents, and they didn't have much that day. But you know how it is as metal fans. You can kind of look at the spines, and you see a metal release when you see it. And picked it up, looked at the front cover, pretty cool. And then I looked at the back. It said Iron Bonehead, and I said, okay, that might be worth checking out. So I brought this to the counter, and the guy there looked it over. He was like, oh, it looks pretty intense. Probably something like Slayer, right? And I said, well, I don't know, but I have a feeling this is going to be a little bit more extreme than a Slayer release. And it is. This is a death doom band that formed in Costa Rica. And from what I understand, they have relocated to Spain. And this is their first and still only full-length release at this point. Slow most of the time, but picks up the speed, some of the later tracks. Dissonant guitars, intense drumming, sick vocals that are exploring cosmic horror themes. And while I do like this, not the kind of thing I would usually buy, and I probably won't be breaking this one out all that often. House of Atreus time once again. House of Atreus are an American melodic death metal band. Been looking at them a lot recently. And this is their brand new EP. Also put out on Iron Bonehead. And this is 5 new songs and 1 cover song. Definitely a bit of a style shift. The last full-length album was in 2018. So it's been about 6 years. And the songs here are definitely faster, more aggressive. I'd say probably shorter, but I would also say a little less memorable, a little less epic. And if I'm being totally honest, the material that preceded this, I preferred all that to this new one. But still a fan, still going to see the next full length for sure. And my favorite tracks on here are probably The Wounded Sovereignty and The Closer, Riding the Storm, which is a Running Wild cover song. My old album for today is Lotto by Xysma. Xysma formed in 1988 in Finland, and for years I've been meaning to listen to the entire discography, and I've been working on that on Spotify right now. Because they formed as a gore grind band and would rapidly morph into a weird death metal band and eventually become a straight up rock band, which is where they arrived in 1996 with Lotto. They actually put out an album 2 years after this in 1998, and then 25 years would go by until they put out their sixth and most recent album, which came out in 2023. So the last couple of Xysma albums, I've been listening to them, and I can't say I'm into them very much, especially the vocals. The vocals sound like Danzig if you sucked out any power, and it's like the guys being ironic or kind of funny. I'm not into these recent vocals at all. Similar vocal style was back in the 90s as well, but it wasn't as bad. I've always had a lot of nostalgia for this album, but, you know, a lot of times passed. A death metal band going rock and roll isn't as novel as it was back then. And when I stick it in now, I don't think the songs are great. There's little vocal parts and little guitar parts that I like, but it doesn't groove enough to have you vibe with. It doesn't rock hard enough to make you say, hell yeah. Again, I just don't like it as much as I did upon its release. But my favorite songs are the ones I remember hearing like they were yesterday. We Just Came Inside and New Gel in Town. The memorable ones that have stuck with me. But the album before this, Lotto, that's the one album from their discography I haven't really listened to yet, and I hope it's the sweet spot, just maybe being a little bit closer to metal than this one was. And finally, the oddball item is this. Acid Witch is Halloween Night cassette single. I got this in the Metalhead box a couple years ago. Psychedelic doom metal with extreme vocals, based out of Detroit. They formed in 2007, but they have only put out 4 full-length releases. However, they're constantly putting out singles, especially around Halloween. That's how I've really kept tabs on these guys. The main themes are definitely horror, Halloween, and drugs. The 2 songs on here are It's Halloween Night and Evil Eye. I love this stuff, but I'm definitely not listening to it outside of the Halloween months. But luckily for me, Halloween begins last half of August. And Slasher Dave is one of the members of this band. And I bring him up because he has a solo project which makes basically Halloween music, keyboard-based, instrumental, but it's got that 80s Halloween campy vibe. I highly recommend you check out Slasher Dave and some Acid Witch while you're at it. So that's it for today. I'll see you next time.